Good afternoon, everyone. All right, you all, I just need you to know that I am a third generation preacher's daughter and minister of the gospel. Can I get an amen? And so, yes, this is a presentation, but I love to show up as my authentic whole self. And so I'm going to replicate what we do every Sunday in my dad's church at home, and that is turn to your neighbor, give them a high five, and say, "This has been an awesome day." And for some of our introverts, I'm recognizing turning to your neighbor and high-fiving is something you didn't have to do for a few years. So we're going to recognize those introverts, get them a little used to being with folks again, turn to another neighbor, high-five them and say, "I'm looking forward to DMC." But for sure, I just want to say that it is an honor to be here and to be sharing with you, my building industry leaders. I've spent close to 20 years in the sustainability green building space, focused on centering and driving DEI to the heart of the climate change agenda. And what I found is the last, I would say, 2 years, COVID really shifted my thinking. I'm sure it shifted many of yours about how important this season and time is. And so I want to start off even now and acknowledging that today is Indigenous People Day. And I really want to acknowledge the land that we stand on, that the Eden Rock has built on. And I want to acknowledge the Tuquista, the Seminoles, the Muskogee, and the Taino lands. We acknowledge the sovereignty and the traditional territories of these tribal nations, these communities that have historically been impacted by access. We know that we can remove barriers. Within this room, we literally design, build, develop, operate. And I know the hearts and the mind of our society at a very macro level is to be more intentional around thinking about people first places. So I want to take a moment to acknowledge not just today, but the history of this place and space. What is real and true is that when we think about place and space, what matters the most is thinking about the health and well-being. And how do we create spaces and places where all people can thrive? I always tell people I'm the 0.001%. As a Black woman executive in the sustainability movement, as a woman of faith. And what I've found is both places, if you look in meeting rooms, ballrooms such as this, are segregated and not diverse, despite the mission and the vision, which is to help not just curate, but foster brotherhood where people can come together. This hospitality industry, it is our earnest job to think about people. And so when I step into rooms such as this, the challenge is, how do we make this look different? How can we have folks from all perspectives showing up in places and spaces such as this where they're welcomed and where we're thinking about their health and well-being? And what we know is, through the social determinants of health, that zip codes have more impact on our health than our genetic code. In fact, our physical and social environments have a greater impact on our state of health than our genetics, access to health care, and lifestyle and behaviors combined. Truly making advances and connecting the dots will require a radical transformation, especially centering marginalized people, experiences, to really think about thriving places and spaces for all. When we think about the city of Miami and where we are right now, I love speaking about the experts that have really advised the International Well Building Institute. We have over hundreds and hundreds of advisors, technical advisors and leaders, thought leaders that have really helped us think through the suite of offerings from the well building standard to all of the ratings and below. And one of our advisors, Dr. Mindy Fullalove, when we think about this season in time, it really comes down to the economics, the have and the have-nots. And so how do we dimensionalize that? The median income for a household right here for the people that work in the hallways and places that you've passed by, $44,268. And so when you think about your household, the people that you work with, I talked about reformation of the movement towards revival. And I'm a Beyonce fan, so she's constantly talking about reformation and reformation. But literally, we are the elite. Maybe not Beyonce and Jay-Z elite, but we are elite. And so how do we break down the gaps for the people that work for you, work with you, that you walk by, the communities that your structures may be embedded in and around? How do we break down those gaps? Even right now, when we think about infrastructures and systems, we heard about Flint, Michigan and the water challenges, and it continues in Mississippi and BO. The gap for the have and the have-nots are real. And so what does health equity look like? Where I heard from another one of our advisors, Dr. Risa Lavizo-Moray, who coined the term health equity. She was at a White House meeting with a bunch of a gathering of Fortune 500s and they said, how long would it take? Thinking in terms of quarters. She said, it'll take a generation. That was before COVID. Post-COVID, 2 generations before we will experience health equity. The challenge is real, but we have the opportunity to use our power well. It is a paradigm shifting moment now where people should be thinking outside of the box, not returning back, not feeling safe to go back, but what does this present day offer for society and for the people that you work with, the folks that come in and out of your structures, hotels every single day? How do we think differently about their health and well-being and how to ensure that everyone thrives? The Well Building Standard is really considering all of these 10 concepts and features and how they can show up evidence-based, third-party verified, strategies that put the tools in your hand on how to make your spaces and places transform for health and well-being, not just for the return on investment, but for people, human performance. Do I feel better in a place when I leave than when I came in? How do I experience my own health and space compared to my colleagues? Enrolling in the WELL program helps you to apply the science and research from the standard itself and turn these results into opportunities for your business. Mitigate record level of burnout, slow quitting, creating a culture of belonging by embedding diversity, equity, and inclusion into your best practices and organizations, ensuring trust for people to get back to work with confidence, and really leverage many of the COVID protocols that you started. How do you continue to accelerate those learnings and the feedback and create a roadmap of growth for health and well-being in your buildings and in your organizations? When we thought about the challenges of COVID, the social unrest, economic frailties that happened over the last 3 years, we wanted to really not just say we support the challenges, we're thinking about vulnerable communities differently. We wanted to think around how do we provide new tools based upon where we stand and our core values of science-based strategies and features in the well-building standard, but how to evolve that to address some of society issues around diversity, equity, and inclusion. The first place that we needed to go to is our community of advisors. We had over 44 global technical leaders and 200 advisors altogether that really helped us to think through who's missing. What are the vulnerable communities we should be addressing when we think about health equity? And what does reimagining place and space look like in this new paradigm and time? And so I'm going to be sharing with you some testimonials from some of these advisors and leaders that helped us to frame out this well equity rating tool that will really help people translate big macro level ideals into strategic steps for actionable impact and change. We've been focused on diversity, equity, inclusion, but justice often is left off the table, whose ideas won't be taken seriously because they aren't in the majority. I had the ability, and I wanted to go back to share that. That is why we spent 2 years interviewing experts all across the building industry, healthcare sector, industry. We transformed the built environment for sustainability, but the roadmap in centering people for health and well-being is the journey that we need to take. The data shows that the job market is still incredibly competitive. 76% of job candidates in the US are seeking out diverse companies. Diverse companies are 2.9 more likely to identify and build leaders. Organizational culture is top consideration for over 3/4 of job candidates. Productivity matters. It matters even in this new state. And the data is very clear for that as well. How do you translate your commitments into actions? Organizations and communities are stronger when everyone is empowered. When we accept that we all play a part in addressing the deep-seated societal inequities we face as a world, we also realize that our focus extends to the workplace. Your people perform best when they can be their full selves. So it makes sense that you should give them and your business the right tools they need to succeed. When we were doing the listening and learning tour with our experts, folks are like, we're committed. We're committed to making things better, to really addressing the have and the have-nots, to create better access and resources and support, not just for recruiting, but retaining. Where do we begin? How do we start? Our data is flawed. We don't know how to get this done. What is the strategic roadmap? And the qualitative space is so hard to really measure empathy. We heard all of this, we listened to the leaders, and I just want to share. This is the CEO of the United Spinal Association, Vincenzo, and he shared with us at a recent conference, I was interviewing several of our co-chairs, the experience that he has in hotels. So I didn't want to leave this stage. We are the built environment and the building industry as well, without having you address. Some would suggest that ADA is outdated, not well enforced. Is there a need for ADA 2.0? And I'd love for you to share your experience even here.
Yeah, so absolutely. So, and I'm very passionate about that, because of, me being a person that we use as a wheelchair, accessibility is like the most important thing for me. And in fact, it's one of the things that, gives me PTSD. When I travel, I love traveling, but every time I go to the hotel and I open the door of the hotel, my heart starts, be saying, oh my God, is this room going to be accessible? Is the bathroom going to be accessible? Because it goes beyond just showering, it goes everything that you do in the bathroom, right? So it gives me a lot of stress. And, and I was telling Kimberly, like, the joy that I felt when I opened my room here and I opened my bathroom. I said, oh my God, this bathroom has everything, and it really gave me like a comfort and an energy to say, you know what, I'm starting the day, with a very good energy. Do we need to rethink ADA? So ADA was amazing to get us where we are right now. But where we are right now is not good enough. And that's something that we need to think. And why do I think that we need to think about ADA 2.0? Is because I think ADA has done a lot of good, but has made us a little bit complacent.
I always share with folks when we're thinking about ADA, the template for that was built on World War II male returned soldiers. World War II hadn't been updated. How many women in here are freezing? That's why so many of our experiences are based on a template and a framework that needs to shift. We need to be thinking more around designing for the extremes. When you design for the extreme experience, you cover everyone in the middle. We're here to talk about accountability, and what does that look like? With a mindset of abundance, because we can very quickly get into strategy, and you can do this, there's a scorecard, you can never score for equity. But we want to create the tools and the supporting resources to help you think through a journey, a roadmap for building your building infrastructure, operational policies that consider creating a diverse and inclusive workplace, environments where everyone can thrive, that will help you bolster employee retention, not just recruitment and productivity, and enhance your ESG reporting and performance. We focused on these communities, vulnerable populations, Black and Indigenous people of color, first-generation immigrants, LGBTQ+ individuals, people who are physically disabled, people who are neurodivergent, primary caregivers. Did you know that 1 in every 7 persons is neurodivergent? And only 50% of those folks have been diagnosed. There's so much we don't know about the people that we work with every day. But we are here to really share with you these actionable impact themes that will help you get to the bottom of your strategy, where you can begin and where you can move in your diversity, equity, and inclusion goals. We begin with exploration and evaluation. That includes strategies to understand the wants and needs of your employees and your organizational stakeholders. We see this as the first step, listening to your people, understanding the challenges, as I said, and working from the extremes and moving in. And we've covered all of these actionable impact strategies and ended with innovation because, as I heard a lot, there are a lot of frameworks out there, Kimberly. There's so many folks that are thinking about racial justice, equity, and design. We want to be able to build on that. So we allowed you to have an innovation ending so that anything that you're currently working with can be considered in this journey. Dig a little bit deeper under each of these areas. Here's what you will find. Responsible hiring and labor practices. Our supply chain is so key. How we show up in some of our manufacturing facilities, how transparent we are around gender pay equity, different examples. Expanding on the health benefits and services that are basic as we move forward in thinking about mental health care needs and well-being. Supportive programs and spaces. I remember being in my offices and all the other tenants in the building were coming to our office because we had a lactation room and space. And it wasn't built into the design of their space as well. And so really thinking holistically around who's serving, who's in your space, who's coming in and out. And of course, how do you show up in the community around you? We want to give you those strategies supported by research to help you get there. Inclusive design. People always want to just, as Vincenzo spoke about, the bathrooms. But when we're understanding persons who are neurodivergent and beyond, getting an understanding of what that looks like will help us to better design and operate our spaces and places. I want to share with you an interior designer, one of our health equity advisors and experts, and her experience.
I think in our society, we're always looking to the medical profession for the magic pill, the Band-Aid that fixes something. And when my son was diagnosed with autism at the age of 3, I was mad. I was mad I was a designer. I was mad that I didn't go to school to be a doctor, a nurse, an occupational therapist, or a speech pathologist. I was like, how am I going to help this child? I'm just a designer. And then I realized it was my calling to find all the barriers in the built environment, to give him the most holistic, nurturing environment that he could grow. And that design has a huge impact on the healthcare. So it's not just healthcare, the industry, the doctor with the magic bullet. It is everyone, the community, businesses, industry, everyone has to come together for health equity.
The challenge is clear. We would want to pass it off. That's not my job. We don't operate our facilities. We don't manage. That's not our space. It is an interconnected puzzle. We must all think about our individual and collective responsibility to think through the spaces that people come into every single day. Have we considered the challenges? Have we considered also the opportunity? And this is a leading interior designer that almost said she almost rethought her entire career, but then she brought her design thinking to really help drive the right research and bring that back to the building industry so we can think more strategically about how to service autistic folks with autism and so many of the other stakeholders that I shared earlier. Equity is crucial to organizational health. Business leaders are thinking about DEI, and we want to help you think through how do you translate the commitment to action. 38% of Fortune 200s are including diversity, equity, inclusion into their ESG reporting. We figured out the E and the G. It's the S that folks are struggling with. Health should be able to flow throughout. In order to achieve health equity, we should be thinking about an inclusive work culture and space always. And so I want to leave you with my last advisor. Todd Sears is the CEO of Out Leadership. And he said, we can't continue this conversation around diversity and equity inclusion without giving people the tools. We are amongst many, but we've done a really good job in thinking through where the gaps are. But now how do we speak to the business community around return on investment? Let's hear from Todd.
I'm the guy that got Wall Street to focus on gay rights because I proved it was a business starting 20 years ago. So I always really come at it from an ROI perspective, which to your question on the ESG definition, I think Greek probably do it better than I could, but originally ESG was for return. It was to deliver return to investors. And so I would encourage us to always go back to that as a starting point, because the more we talk about DEI and all these important things that matter to us, like sustainability and DEI, sometimes the farther we get away from the bottom line. And ultimately, that will not serve us well. I think we've got to root whatever you're talking about in some sort of bottom line sustainable approach, because the companies you're dealing with are not for profits, right? They will only do what's in their bottom line sustainable best interest on an ongoing basis. And so the E in ESG, I think, has done a pretty great job of doing that, right? You know, all the different sort of pieces that all of you do a whole lot more often than I do in your day-to-day, so around convincing companies to be more green, sustainable, et cetera, there is a direct bottom line impact you can prove. On the governance piece as well, the S is where I think people are really still kind of struggling. We can talk more about that, but I think the top line that I would encourage us to think about is how can you tie all of these pieces to what someone's bottom line best interest is? How do they develop new clients? How do they develop new markets? How do they innovate? How do they attract talent? How do they increase talent retention? How does it impact their brand? All of those things are bottom line. It doesn't have to just be a quote unquote profit, but I would encourage us as we're thinking about that to make sure that that doesn't get lost.
He spoke about the return on investment. I would want to flip it to the opportunity cost that's available through all of this. So as we wrap up this moment and really thinking through, I would say my last 2 years of the Listening and Learning Tour, to really think through how to embed health and well-being strategies into our ESG goals and how to hold folks accountable through diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's a vision for tomorrow that starts today. My grandfather worked in the steel mills of Baltimore and did not get to retire. He died of black lung. Because he didn't retire, it was about 6 months before his retirement, my grandmother wasn't able to receive pension. At that time, there was no one to advocate for people of color. And so I'm standing on this stage on his shoulders. I'm standing on this stage because I had allies and folks that spoke up, that opened up the doors. They're rock stars across all cultures and communities. It needs to be a mind shift in this new paradigm and time. We can operate from a place of abundance. Bringing more folks in doesn't mean you get less. How do we share our power well? How do we think about the extremes, vulnerable communities that generally aren't in the rooms and the spaces that you're in? How do I show back up at hotel spaces? And we're even more diverse in this moment. Building the Greenville International Conference and Expo, I remember 15 football fields of the clean energy economy, and I never saw a growth for small businesses, minority businesses, women-owned businesses in that area. There is abundance. Leverage your influence. Be an ally. Think about your supply chain. And we can do better. As I said for folks, 3 things you should be asking yourself: who's impacted? Who's left out? Who can be lifted up? Thinking both about human capital and social capital performance. What's happening to me, for better, for worse? What's happening to others, for better, for worse? There is abundance. We have the tools and the roadmap to help you to shift and think differently. Come talk to us. Come talk to Tori. Tori, where are you? Shout out. Sorry, the light's right here with me, but we are here to help you think more strategically and differently about health and well-being for all. God bless and thank you.